All right. I hope you can hear me all right. If you would be so kind, I have been asked by our media guy back here, please turn off your cell phones. This is being recorded, so it'll be funny if it goes off in the middle of the information overload. It'll be really embarrassing if mine went off. So I'll just, as we're getting that transition, I will tell you, I am the world's biggest freeze baby. I mean, I just hate the cold. And my family knows what a big freeze baby I am. And when I told them I was going to be going to Minnesota in February, they said, "What, are you crazy? Why are you doing that?" And so I went out and bought socks. So I'm wearing ski socks. These things are the best. So if you notice that I have stripes on my socks, it's because if I wore like regular dress socks, I would be freezing right now. So anyway, so thank you for your kind response to the last hour. We're going to take a little bit deeper dive in decisional overload, decisional fatigue, some of the reliable biases that you're going to make in the decision-making process, and then we're going to talk about how do you then regulate the information flow that's coming into your lives. If you've got questions, raise them. I'm totally open to questions during this session. For the purposes of the recording, if you'd be so kind as to come to the mic and ask your question. So raise your hand, ask a question at the mic. If you don't feel comfortable coming to the mic, I'll repeat your question so that everyone else can hear it and that we have the benefit of it being on the recording. All righty. Well, we're back. So as I talked about when we started out in the last hour, the old thinking is that where logical, non-emotional decisions are better. We want to be a rational thing. The reality is those without emotions, if we look at people with brain lesions that impair their ability to understand and identify emotions, they tend to have a prolonged and chronic pattern of bad life choices. So we like to think that sort of Vulcan sort of emotionless decision is an ideal. In fact, people who are not good with emotions tend to make worse life decisions because, and I hope I've made a compelling case, almost all of our decisions are emotional. They're not rational. They're rationalizing decisions. We do not follow a deductive path. That's the old thinking. We tend to decide and then come up with explanations for our decisions. We used to think more information is better. And actually, more information decreases decision quality. There was an experiment. I'll explain a couple experiments, but there was an experiment. You know, when you go to the grocery store, see, we're back at the grocery store. So when you're at the grocery store, those ladies with the nets on their head and the tiny little tables with the stuff that you're supposed to sample. How many of you guys go Saturday morning for brunch? So there they are, and so there was a company that had all these kind of esoteric, exotic jelly flavors. You know, like mango chipotle and guayaba, whatever. And so they would put this display out, and they'd have the people who are staffing it check mark how many people would taste. And people come up and go, "Ooh, that sounds good. Ooh, that's interesting." And so they would check. And then they would check the register tape at the end of the day to find out how many people bought their stuff. So they had 18 different things out. People tasting all these things. Nobody would buy it. And they're like, we get all these tastes. All these people are tasting our stuff, but nobody's buying it. What's the deal? What they did was they reduced the number of choices from 18 to 6 and included grape, strawberry, one of the standard berries, and then a few of the esoteric chipotle mango flavors. And they found that the number of tastes remained the same, but because they reduced the number of choices that people had, the decision to purchase went up. So what we do is we confuse the idea that, oh, I got to get more information. If I just have more information, I'll make a better decision. The reality is we're starting to make the mistake that touching the information is the same as analyzing the information. You know, I taught a course at a college once, and it was a sophomore, junior level course, and these students, because they had the access to the internet, had better bibliographies than I had on my doctoral dissertation. I mean, they were getting resources through LexisNexis, I mean, these really arcane journals and these really good scientific studies. And I'm looking at the bibliographies thinking, man, these kids rock. And then I read their papers. They were the worst papers I had ever read. And what we're confusing now is the amount of information we have. We touch it, but no one is then translating it. They're just clabbering it all together. So they're badly constructed papers. They're poorly thought out, poorly reasoned, but they've touched a lot of stuff. So we've got a generation or two of kids coming through school who think it is sufficient to have touched the information rather than to consume it and process it. So we're really getting worse decision making. So more information actually decreases decision quality. We also think that thinking about your thinking is better. Actually, thinking about your thinking could, in many cases, decrease decision quality. So we're back to jellies. You know there are people who are professional tasters. That's their job. They just taste. Do you guys know about these people? Okay, I used to go to church with a lady who was a professional taster. And I said, really? I've heard about those people. I go, like, what do you do? She goes, well, actually, I'm in management now. So, like, you manage people who taste stuff? And I said, so do you, like, sit around and eat Oreos all day? She goes, no, we're in the savories division. And I don't even know what a savory is. What's gravies, soups? And I'm thinking, okay. And so there are professional flavorists, and they can taste different qualities of things. And so we go back to jelly. And if you ask professional flavorists to rate the best tasting jelly, they rate it. If you give people the same selection of jellies, amateurs like the rest of us, unless of course any of you are professional flavorists, and you ask us to rate which one do you like the most, we tend to, on average, pick the same thing that the flavorists like. Unless we do one thing, which is make you write a paragraph about which one you like the most. And as soon as you write the paragraph, you think about your thinking, you tend to change your mind. And so those of you who are expert in an area, and we're all experts in jelly, if you're an expert in the area, you will tend to decrease your decision quality by reflecting on it and writing on it, which is one of the reasons that committee work, there's a pantheon of reasons why committee work is so bad. But if you get an expert, the expert's decision will almost always be better than the committee decision, because the committee decision, you'll churn it and churn it and churn it, and that will actually decrease decision quality. Do you guys... You recognize this in your lives and in your workplace. Okay, and since we're on committees. Committees tend to also do a thing called risky shift. Have you guys heard of the risky shift phenomena? Okay, if you give a group of people a decision, they will tend to, as a group, make a riskier, more dangerous decision than an individual will. Because the individual will say, well, I need to really think this one through, because if it goes sideways, it's going to come back on me. If it's a committee and it goes sideways, they go, well, I didn't really want to do it. I was just going along with everybody else. It's really those people over there. And so it diffuses the responsibility, and the committee as a whole will make a more dangerous decision. And so I'm not a huge fan of committees. And frankly, they just waste a lot of time. So let's talk about the whole decision process. Again, I hope I've compelled you to believe that you get paid to think. Yes, there may be paperwork involved, but every day you're making thousands of decisions that have effects on people's lives. And there are 4 basic phases. And what I'm going to describe are biases in each of these phases that will predict errors that you and other people are likely to make, even if you're expert in the area. So here are the 4 phases. The first is encoding and attention. What we pay attention to and how we pull it into our brain. Okay? The second is memory and storage. How it gets stored in our brain, and then how it gets retained in your brain. Okay? The next one is the decision phase, when you actually make the decision. And the last is the attribution. After the decision has been made, how do you explain it? Okay? Each of these phases in the decision process Thank you, Stephanie. Each of these phases has a different set of errors. Okay? So I'm going to go through a couple in each of them and the biases that you're likely to make because of it. The first is priming. Now I'm going to insult every one of you in here. Ready? You ready? Your brain is like the junk drawer in your kitchen. Okay? You guys all have a junk drawer in your kitchen, right? Okay, so tell me, what's on the top of your junk drawer? Okay? What you use last. So what's in yours? I got a pizza coupon because I just cut it out. Okay, so scissors, what? Screwdriver. Duct tape, screwdriver. Yeah. Pardon me? Pens, paper clips, right? Where's the flashlight? It's like way in the back, and the batteries are dead because you never use it. So the thing in the back of the drawer is that thing you never use. You know, and like occasionally, once every 5 years, you'll clean out your junk drawer. And you go, oh my God, I forgot about this. Okay, and it's something you've never used, and then you probably throw it away, or you think, oh, I wonder if these work. You know, so that's what's in the back of your junk drawer, and that's the way our brain works. Is that recently and frequently accessed items come to mind more quickly than ideas that have not been activated. Okay, the thing that's on the front of your mind is the thing that you're going to remember first. So when people ask you, how common is it that a certain thing is, you will go back to your memory and you'll pull out the thing that's easy to pull out. So let's take a language example. Which is more common? Words that start with the letter K or words that have K as the third letter? Kangaroo, kayak, kitten. Now, and like you guys are trying to think of like K, awkward. Is that how you spell it? Okay, so it's hard. It's hard to do. And because it's easier, because our brains store words with the first letter. How many of you guys have brains that store by the third letter? Anybody? Okay, but actuarially, if we look, K in the third position is far more common than K in the first position. Okay? But it's hard for us to retrieve that. And we tend to go based on what's easy to retrieve. So if it's easy to retrieve, you're going to tend to see that first. This is very important with one of the decision biases that we're going to come up to in a few minutes. But I hope I've sufficiently insulted you. Okay, so here's another encoding error, which is apophenia. Is seeing meaningful patterns in random data. And this is the Virgin Mary in a tortilla. Oh, yeah. Okay, our brains are designed to see patterns. We see faces, we see patterns, and we tell stories. If there's a set of random information, we'll find a story that explains it all. Does that make sense? And sometimes we'll put on the data information that isn't really there. That's a burn on a tortilla. It's not the Virgin Mary. But none of you can unsee it now, can you? Okay? So here's the deal. We tend to find meaning in things that don't have meaning. So you'll look at the data of court cases, of things that are happening in your community, and you'll create a story that makes sense of it in your head. But that story may have nothing to do with the reality. That's just how our brains work. So one of our errors is coming up with a story that may or may not have anything to do with the reality of the situation. Of course, none of you in here. It's just those other people who didn't come who make this error. We all make this error. All right? The Zeigarnik, now we're going to move to memory biases. The Zeigarnik effect is incompleted tasks are remembered. Once a task is complete, the memory for the information disappears. Named after a Russian student, and her name was Zeigarnik. And the story goes that she and a bunch of other psychology students were at lunch, and they were at a fancy restaurant where the waiter didn't write anything down. Yes, very good. Oh, yes. And you'll have that? Oh, yes. Oh, very good. Yes. Oh. And nothing would get written down. 8 people were there, you know, all getting their meal. And they all leave, they clear the check, and somebody had forgotten their wallet or something and went back and they asked the waiter, now, what was the bill on that? What did they get? And the waiter said, I have no idea. And they said, but you remembered all of our orders. None of us got the wrong thing. You got it all right. And he said to her, once you pay the bill, all of it evaporates from my mind. Now, those of you who remember life before speed dial, before cell phones, when you actually had to look up the phone number in the book and you'd have to actually dial it or do this. Okay. My sister has a rotary dial phone in her house, and my son, who's 21, he was about 18 at the time, says to my daughter, who was 10 at the time, oh, I'll show you how to use this. See, here's what you do. If you want to dial a 2, you put your finger in the last hole into the 0, and you make it go to the 2, and that's how you dial a 2. I said, you're kidding me. You're teaching her this? And so anyway, so you guys remember when you actually had to look up numbers, right? You'd have to look up numbers. You dial the phone, and you'd get a busy signal. By the way, my daughter comes to me with the phone one day and goes, what's this noise? It's making this funny noise. And I go, it's a busy signal. She goes, I've never heard that before. So you'd get the busy signal, you'd hang up the phone, and you'd call back in about 5 minutes. Do you remember when you didn't have to look at the number again? Anybody remember this? Okay, yes, thank you. I appreciate the audience participation. So you'd call it again. You wouldn't have to dial. You wouldn't have to remember it again because it was stuck in your head. As soon as the call got completed, it would fall out of your head. And I'm sure that some of you have the same experience with numbers or data in your work, that as soon as you close the file, boom, it's out of your head. And somebody will show you your work product later, and you go, I don't even remember doing this. But it looks like my work. Okay? And that's because the Zeigarnik effect has happened. It's closed. Now, this is what gets you at 3 in the morning. When you wake up, you're going through all of your incomplete tasks when you wake up. And the reason you're preoccupied with things is you've got lots and lots of unclosed loops. As soon as you close those, they'll fall out of your head. So those of you who are waking up in the middle of the night, here's what our two quick recommendations. Number one, keep a pad of paper by the side of your bed. Okay? When you wake up and you're like scrolling through things, these are things that are incomplete. How do you complete them? You write them down. And you tell yourself, now that I have it written down, I won't forget it. Because there you are, you're laying there, you're about to fall asleep. Don't forget, don't forget, can't forget, don't forget, don't, must not, oh, okay. Okay, so that's the first thing is a little pad of paper, a little light, write down what you need to do in the morning. Then you'll find that over a period of time, you'll be able to fall asleep more quickly. Second advice, and this is kind of off topic, but it'll help y'all. If you're waking up between 3:30 and 4 in the morning, and that's when it happens, and you find yourself doing all this stuff, the thing that's really hurting you the most is your digital clock. You lean over, you look, right? It's either green or it's red. I don't know what color yours is. But there you are. You wake up in the middle of the night and you go, oh, you start doing arithmetic. I got to get up at 6 o'clock. It's 3:15. That means I got 2 hours and 45 minutes. Okay, must aggressively get back to sleep. It's like you punch the pillow, you turn your head, okay. And then like, oh, I've been up for 45 minutes. I got 2 hours. I'm going to be so tired tomorrow. Okay. That's what keeps you awake. Take the thing, put it under the bed, put it in a drawer somewhere, put it across the room, okay? That way you can't see it. Because if you wake up in the middle of the night, you write your little note, and you go, you know what? I will fall back asleep. I don't need to know what time it is. Okay? Now I know that's an incredible temptation for a lot of you. I'm blessed with extremely poor vision, so I can't see that far. It doesn't really matter. But I know those of you who have decent vision, that really gets you, and you look at it. So those are the two things to help you with sleep. But the Zeigarnik effect is incompleted tasks are remembered better, and they tend to continue to clog up your cognitive works until you complete them. And this is the problem with information overload. And too many things happening and too much interruption, nothing ever gets completed, right? And so you're constantly frittering and fidgeting with all these ideas in your head. Close up the task, complete it, kill it, and you will free up more decisional space in your head so that you can do more stuff. The next is a memory bias, the von Restorff effect, that events or data that stick out are remembered better than more frequent data. If you're as old as me, what did everybody notice about this picture? Barefoot. Paul doesn't have shoes on. That means he's dead. Okay? So what we tend to do is we look at the thing that's different. Now, I've looked at this a lot, and they all have shoes except for Paul. They're all wearing dark except for John. They're all wearing jackets except for George, and they're all good looking. That was a cheap shot, but I couldn't help it. So the von Restorff effect is we tend to notice the thing that sticks out. So if you have a whole group of people walk in and then one walks in who looks really different or acts really different, that's the one you remember all day. Or if a case comes through or some paperwork comes through, we tend to notice the thing that sticks out. That's just how we remember things. That doesn't mean it's more important. That doesn't mean it has a greater influence on the outcome. It's just easier for us to remember. Now, here's what you need to know about your memory. Number one, it is fallible. You do not remember everything. And you go, oh, I've got a memory like a steel trap. No, you don't. Okay? You do not. Your memory is completely fallible. And people talk about, repressed memories and stuff. You know what? We have so much passive forgetting that happens in our head. So much has happened in your life that you have absolutely no recollection of. We don't have to invoke some traumatic event from childhood. Most of you have forgotten lots of things. Our memory is fallible. Let me give you an example. One morning I wake up to I was in graduate school, this really dramatic dream of green frogs, these bright green frogs, and they're teeming around on this dark soil. And I'm like, wow, that's a cool dream. So I'm eating my Rice Krispies, and for whatever reason, my mom calls me up. And I'm eating my Rice Krispies, and I'm talking to her. I had this weird dream. I don't really call my mom about weird dreams, but not so much anymore. No. So I'm on the phone. I'm eating my Rice Krispies. The mom's talking to me. I had this weird dream about these green frogs on this dark earth. It was so cool. She goes, oh, well, that was that time we were in India. I lived in India as a kid. That was that time we were in India. And you and Laura, we were stopped by the side of the road, remember, because the car overheated. And we went over there, and we were under the tree. And you and Laura, that's my sister, you went over to that ditch, and there are all those frogs there. I go, Mom, I have absolutely no recollection what you're talking about. She says, well, talk to Laura. That's my sister. Ask her. I go, okay. So later on, I'm talking to Laura. Laura, do you remember the thing? Oh, there's those bright green frogs. They were just everywhere. And I go, that wasn't the other time. No. We were under the tree and the car had overheated. I go, I don't remember that at all. How can you not remember that? Call Dad. So I call up my dad. Dad, do you remember? Oh, yeah, I think I got a picture. Okay. So everyone in my family recalls the green frogs. I don't know what happened. I don't remember it. It wasn't a traumatic event. So those of you who remember, I won't forget this. Yes, you will, unless you write it down, which is why record keeping is so important, especially in your business, is that you need to have some record of it, because I guarantee you, your memory will passively forget it. And the way our brain is set up, your brain tends to prune off things that don't get used, and they evaporate from your brain. Okay? Now, your brain is constantly growing, so you can keep laying down new memories. But if you're not remembering something on a frequent basis, it will go away. And actually, the current theory of memory is that you're not actually remembering the event. You're remembering the last time you remembered the event. And that has biases that we'll talk about in a little bit. The next thing is memory is malleable. Malleable is what metal is. You can hammer it, shape it, and change it. Your memory is malleable. It is not unchangeable. So there's a lot of research in your business, it really matters, in eyewitness testimony. Eyewitness testimony is the best we got, and it is awful. And so in looking at eyewitness testimony, there's a lot of research on this. And I was interviewing a guy as a job candidate, and his dissertation topic was eyewitness testimony. And so he's in Arkansas, and he's talking to his neighbor, and he says, I need an event that a lot of people saw, where there's videotape evidence of what happened, so that I can interview them to find out what they remember. And the guy says, well, why don't you do that time that boy collapsed in the football game? Well, it turns out that one of the local high schools, one of the big high schools, there's a big game, and the quarterback collapsed on the field. And so there's videotape evidence, and you have a stadium full of people who've seen it. So he gets the videotape. He finds these people and he starts to interview them. And he says, do you remember in the third quarter when the quarterback collapsed and fell? Oh, it was awful. It was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. And do you remember when he was convulsing on the field? Oh, yeah. And do you remember how his dad, he was wearing that big red baseball cap, came down and held him? Oh, yeah, it was touching. It was really touching. And then the paramedics came and they surrounded him and they got out the paddles and they shocked him back to life. Oh, yes. I mean, it was so scary to watch his body go like that. Okay, great, thanks. Can you come back next week and answer some questions about the event? Yeah, sure, that'd be great. So you come back the next week, and they said, what quarter did the football player collapse? Third quarter. What color was Dad's hat? Red. Did the paramedics drive onto the field? Yes. Did they have to use the paddles to defibrillate his heart? Yes. Then he shows them the videotape of the event. It wasn't the third quarter. Dad was wearing a white cowboy hat. The paramedic squad did come out onto the field, but they didn't use the paddles. He had inserted memories. And they go, this is not the way I remember it. This video, are you sure this is the right event? Are you sure this? And so even though there was videotape evidence, what he showed is that through the course of questioning, you can change a person's memory. It is malleable. And so that's why eyewitness questioning is so important, because people will misremember based on the way you ask the question. And in courts, that's terribly important. And I don't know if I'm guessing many of you are not involved in the questioning of witnesses, but it matters, especially when you're trying to remember what happens in your office. The way you ask questions of your coworkers will change the way they remember an event. So there's also leveling and sharpening. Because you're not actually remembering the event, you're remembering the last time you remembered the event, certain things will take greater precedence in your memory than others. Those will be sharpened and other things will be leveled. So when you question somebody, hey, in that accident, was it raining? Oh, yes. And were tires, how long had it been since you changed gotten new tires? Oh, it's been a while. So what happens is that the importance of the tires and the rain take on precedence over the fact that the person ran a stop sign. Did you write? I don't remember the stop sign, but I remember it was rainy and it had been a while since the tires were changed and I probably couldn't get enough grip. You see what happens? Is that over the course of time, the key information tends to get confused by what's easier to remember. Does this make sense? Because you're not remembering the event, you're remembering the last time you thought of the event. We have a stereotypical bias. Now, people, I'm just the weatherman. I'm not advocating this, I'm just reporting it. Which is, memory is biased towards racial and gender stereotypes. In '99, which is in my mind not very long ago, Schachter reported that black-sounding names were more likely to be remembered as names of criminals. Well, that really matters to you guys, doesn't it? Because whether or not the person's guilty or not, if they have a name that evokes in somebody's head guilt of a criminal behavior, does that make sense? So this is an issue. Our brains tend to operate on stereotypes, so it's important that you recognize that. We also have a cross-race effect. Members of one race have greater difficulty recalling members of another race. Okay? I don't know why that is. I'm not saying it's good, I'm just reporting it. And that when you're dealing in a court situation, if the person you're dealing with is not of your race, it may be harder for you to make these distinctions about that person. Jurors may have difficulty distinguishing the source of certain testimony if many of the witnesses are of a different race than yours. And from what you were saying about life here in Minneapolis, you've got people from lots of racial and ethnic groups, lots of cultural backgrounds, which requires a greater degree of thinking. we tend to blend together. This is a recent fraud article from Ohio. And if you look at these names, if you don't know these names, they all kind of mix together. You've got Patel, Petri, Patel, Basavar, Sharma, Rawal, Patel, Shah, Thacker, Patel, Tayal, Chiraku, Gutharati, Patel, Ravel, Sakticha, Patel, Namin, Tran, Greenbane, Faid, Sayani, she must have married a white guy, Achara, Leotis Elliott, and LeVar Carter. You know what you're doing in your head right now? Unless you've got a lot of background with Indians, you're lumping all of the Indian names together, the white guy and the two black guys. You know you're doing it, okay? And so what we tend to do is we lump people in categories, okay? Now, that's neither good nor bad, it just is, okay? So you need to be aware that you're doing this, and this affects your decision making with people who I like to think are more complicated than that, which we'll talk about. The next in line effect, in terms of a memory bias. You tend not to remember the person who's speaking right in front of you because you're formulating your response. And so if somebody is speaking to you and you're working on your response, forget it. It's bop, 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 bop. Okay? And then if somebody responds to you after you've talked, you might want to double check to make sure they actually heard what you said, because they've been formulating their response the whole time you've been talking. Am I making sense here? Does this sound like anybody you know? Now, the decision phase. The decision phase is, this part is called judgmental heuristics. This is one of my favorite topics in psychology. And it was invented by these two guys, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Tversky passed away in the 90s, but they worked as a team for years to look at the biases that we make in our decisions. Kahneman just recently came out with a book that I'm reading right now called Thinking Fast and Slow, where he talks about thinking errors that we tend to make and the different ways we tend to think. Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002 in economics for the application of what you're about to learn to behavioral economics. So when you go home today, you can say, you know, what'd you learn? You go, well, Aristotle was the first thing, and, you know, Pythagoras and some ancient Greek history, and then the afternoon was some Nobel Prize winning economic theory. It's salt. So anyway, so what Kahneman and Tversky said, we are cognitive misers. In other words, we're mentally lazy. We tend to go into habitual patterns of thinking because it's just easier. And the reason we don't like change is because change makes us think about everything. Okay? If you move, you forget how to get to the grocery because you have to think about it all the time. If you go to a different country, you have to constantly be reminding yourself, oh, it's different here. Oh, this is different, especially if you're in England. You know, we drive on the left. Those are all things that you have to think about. And we tend to revert back to the way it used to be. And in some of your courts, you're in the middle of a seed change. There's a lot happening, and that makes you think more, and that wears you out, and it makes you unhappy, grumpy, or fearful. So we'll talk about why we're cognitive misers and some of the ways that this works. And we're going to talk about Skippy. So here's one of the shortcuts we do, is the representative heuristic. The representative heuristic essentially says we use an example and infer that it's representative of another object. Now, we have to use the representative heuristic in order to live our lives. Do you guys remember the first time you went grocery shopping by yourself? And you're having to make decisions on stuff? It took me forever. I bought like 14 things. I was there for 3 hours. Because there I am in front of the peanut butter. Okay? Mom always bought Skippy. Always got Super Chunk. Okay? And there I am, Skippy, Jif, Peter Pan. The world is open to me. Which do I do? So I'm deciding. There I am again deciding. So I've had to decide. So I read the labels, and then I figure out, and this is before they had this, price per ounce. So there I am, I'm looking at it, and I go, well, looks like Skippy is actually cheaper per ounce on the whole than these other brands. Then I have the size decision, right? Which is, do I get the jumbo size? Is that cheaper per ounce? So I'm doing the math. It's like, okay, I've got 13.6 ounces divided by $1.79. I didn't have a calculator. And so I figured out, and what I decide after about 14 phases of the decision is that I'm going to buy Skippy, creamy. I'm going to go wild. I'm going to get the creamy, okay, in the big jar. Okay? So the next time I go to the grocery store, what do? Do I have to make that series of decisions over again? No, I don't even slow down. I need peanut butter. I look blue lid, big jar, boom. I don't look at the price. I don't compare ingredients. I don't think about any of that anymore because I've used the representative heuristic. The last time I bought this jar of Skippy peanut butter, it was a good value at that size and tasted good. I'll get the same thing again. Right? That's the representative heuristic. How well does that work with peanut butter? Pretty well. But do you know that the retailers know you use this representative heuristic, and now they price it so once you've bought the large long enough, they know that they can increase the price per ounce of the large because you're not looking at price anymore. You're just looking at the blue lid on the big jar. And so they're able to increase their profits on a jar of Skippy because you're not thinking about it anymore. Oh, so this doesn't work so well even with Skippy. What happens when you start to work with more complex things like, say maybe, I don't know, people? I like to think that people are far more complex than Skippy. But you know what? People base stereotyping on the representative heuristic. They go, hey, Roger, you're a middle-aged guy, you're white, you don't have very much hair. That must mean, and they infer all these things about me because of the way I look, where I'm from, my gender, my race, and my haircut. Okay? So you will all do that. You'll all make stories up about me, apohenia, based on the representative heuristic. Well, when you find out some sort of arcane detail about me, you have to plug that in and go, that doesn't really make sense. But you'll tend to go back to your stereotyping of me because, frankly, it's easier, right? Well, you do this with your clients as well and the customers in your court and your coworkers. If they fit a category, you're far more likely to lump them in that same category because you think about them with the same complexity that you think about peanut butter. You got that going for you, which is nice. That's the representative heuristic. The availability heuristic couples with priming. The availability heuristic is the easier it is to come to mind, the more common you think it is. How many of you guys have ever played Slug Bug? Punch Buggy? Same. Okay, Slug Bug. And those of you who haven't, you have not lived. So I'll explain it to you. The way Slug Bug works is this. And by the way, I used to own a Volkswagen Beetle, one of the old ones, okay? And by the way, there are two kinds of owners of the old Beetles. The kind who say, I wish I would have never gotten rid of that car. It's the best car in all the world. Oh, you could pull the engine out by yourself and just repair it, over the weekend and you have a brand new car. And why did I ever get rid of that car? It's the best car in all the world. And the other group are people, I was nearly killed in a Volkswagen. Okay? I'm in the second category. Okay, so if you haven't played Slug Bug, here's how it works. You're driving down the car, and if you see a Volkswagen Beetle, you have the divine right to yell Slug Bug and then punch the person in the car next to you. And no punchbacks, okay? And so you are allowed to clobber the person in the car with you. Now, what that does to adolescent males is it primes adolescent males to be constantly on the lookout for Volkswagen Beetles. Okay, I have a 13-year-old daughter who loves Slug Bug, and so I am constantly on the lookout for Volkswagen Beetles. I mean, I know where they are on the way home from school. There are 3, and I know where they are. Okay, so I'm ready. One time we were driving past a Volkswagen dealer. Bam, 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 bam. Okay, so and how I was nearly killed in a Volkswagen Beetle. Those of you who had the old ones, you had one, and you were in the I loved it, right, category? Yeah, well, I was nearly killed. So it was February. It was very cold, and if you had one of those cars, the heat didn't really work very well. It worked great in the summer, yeah. So the windshield would frost up, and so, pardon me?
A 6-inch ruler.
you always had to have a scraper on the inside of the glass. Okay, so there I am. And, you know, the glass is really close to you. So I'm driving down the road on a 2-lane road, 45 miles an hour, and it's really cold. I've got frost on the inside, so I would put my hand on the windshield and have the heat from my hand melt the ice that got on the inside, and then I'd scrape around it. So I'm driving down the road, and I see this pickup coming, and it's a Ford F-250, and there are these young men in the car. And I can see that the guy who's the passenger goes... Now, work the physics of this. He's the passenger, driver here, hands it 10 and 2. Bam! You know, I'm like this. And so he goes left to center with the F-250 coming into my lane. There's a ditch on one side. Fortunately, I'm alive today. But I was nearly killed in a Volkswagen Beetle. Now, the reason I'm telling you the Volkswagen story is we are all primed to see Volkswagen Beetles, and we will tend to overestimate the frequency of beetles because we're primed to see it. It's on the top of our junk drawer of our memory. Now, those of you who don't have Volkswagen Beetles, you know you do this because the car you drive or the car you're currently lusting after, you see everywhere. Okay? I bought a Subaru, which I never... Now, I don't have it... My sons are driving it now, but I had never seen a Subaru in my life, okay? I buy a Subaru Outback, and suddenly they're everywhere. And it's always driven by some white guy with dreadlocks with a Love Your Mother bumper sticker on the back. And he always feels compelled to go, peace, man, to me. I go, that's the representative heuristic right there, isn't it? Okay, I'm in a... So anyway, you get primed to see it, and you tend to overestimate the frequency. I have never been inside a Buick Century. I don't know what they look like. I don't know what they're like. But if I was to estimate, I would say Subarus are far more common than Buick Centuries because I'm primed to see them. So we overestimate the frequency of things because we're prepared to see it. This has tremendous implication in how we estimate the frequency of events. So, which do you think has a higher estimate of crime in your city? People who watch the local news or people who don't watch the local news? People who watch the news have a higher estimate of crime in the city. Because the way local news works, if it bleeds, it leads. Okay? Nobody wants to watch video of my backyard. Here we are in a quiet neighborhood. There are children playing. There's a swing set. They're swinging. Look at that. Film at 11. I mean, nobody wants to watch that, okay? What they want to watch is yellow police tape and fires and arson. I mean, you always see this on the news because film in my neighborhood is crummy. And guess what? Film in your neighborhood is crummy too. Nobody wants to watch people having fun, sitting on the back porch, doing nothing. So if it bleeds, it leads. So who's more right? Who's more accurate? People who watch the local news or people who don't watch the local news? The people who don't watch the local news are more accurate. And by filling your head with crime, you tend to overestimate the frequency of crime. If you fill your head with lots of bad things that are happening in society, and I guess working in the court systems you have an overabundance of seeing that, you will tend to become jaded, hopeless for the future of humanity. Okay, realize you are looking at a subset of the population. You're looking at a sliver of the population. And it's easy for you to take this availability heuristic and go global with it. Because right now, these people are difficult to deal with. This slice of Americana is not so pleasant. You tend to think all of Americana is not going to be pleasant. All right. The attitude heuristic. The attitude heuristic is if you have a positive attitude about a person, you tend to believe false positive or false negative information about them. Which are you more likely to believe? That your best buddy secretly reads to dyslexic children every Wednesday afternoon or is secretly embezzling money from his employer? You're going to believe he's secretly reading to dyslexic children on Wednesday afternoon. Okay? Why? Because it fits with your positive attitude about that person. Now, that's the halo effect. We tend to believe false positive information about a person about whom we have a positive attitude. We tend to believe false negative information about a person who we have a negative attitude about. Okay? Now, I like professional sports. Okay? And one of my favorite characters in professional sports is a guy some of you may have heard of, named Dennis Rodman. Okay? Now, which is easier to believe? Dennis Rodman secretly reads to dyslexic children on Wednesday afternoon, or Dennis Rodman? Okay, no, but let's talk about this. Dennis Rodman has consciously cultivated a bad boy image. So it's easier for all of us to believe bad boy things about Dennis Rodman than, and I don't know which is true, but false information is easier to believe if it sits with our predetermined hypothesis. The fact that he's one of the best rebounders in the history of NBA matters not, because he's cultivated this bad boy image. So, the more extreme your position, the more sure you are of the factuality of something that you know nothing about. So if you're an extreme believer in something, even if it has no facts, oh, I'm absolutely sure of that. So we tend to, based on our attitude, believe false information. And we also have a physical attractiveness bias. We tend to put positive things on people who are physically attractive. Now, I'm just the weatherman here. I'm just reporting the news. I'm not saying it's good or bad. And that works really well for men. The better looking a man is, the more we think he's smarter and more competent, and he should be successful. That works to a point for women. So ladies, don't beat me up on this, but this works to a point for women. Once a woman goes beyond that level of attractiveness, we tend to think, well, we know how she got there. Okay? So it actually has a boomerang effect for women. And we see this gets played out in a book called The Survival of the Prettiest, where it talks about this physical attractiveness bias works perfectly well for men. We see a correlation. Competence gets attributed to men the better looking they are, but for women it tends to peak at a certain level of attractiveness and then dip after that. Now, those of you who are going, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Yeah, but if I was to show all of you pictures of people, you would uniformly, across race, across gender, be able to recognize and rate, on average, the better looking versus the less good looking people. It's just, on average, we will all agree, across cultures, across genders, we know what we're looking at. I'm just reporting the news here. I'm not saying, okay. We also tend to do the false consensus effect. We overestimate the number of people who agree with us on any issue. I may insult some people in here. Those of you who are in the Flat Earth Society, who don't believe in a round Earth, and were secretly cussing under their breath when I was talking about Pythagoras and the round Earth, what they will tell me is, we're out here, and you just don't know it. There's more of us than you've ever believed. Okay? So the flat earthers really do believe there are lots of people who believe the same way as they do. And the more you believe a position, whether there's data for it or not, the more you secretly believe other people agree with you. Which is why you can sometimes be very, very disappointed when a certain decision goes differently than you expected. Because to you, it was completely and patently obvious. Only an idiot could have decided the other way. Okay. The anchoring heuristic. The process of estimating some value by starting with an initial value and adjusting it to the new instance. You know, what the heck is he talking about? If I was to split the room up in two and say, hey, this half of the class, and you guys all put wax in your ears and went ma, 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 and I was to say, hey, this half of the group, is the Mississippi River longer or shorter than 500 miles? You would say longer. And if I was to say, give me an estimate about how long the Mississippi River is, you would say 1,500 miles. Okay. If I was to come over to this half and you hadn't heard this, and I would say, hey, is the Mississippi River longer or shorter than 5,000 miles? You would say shorter. And I would ask you, what's your estimate of the length of the Mississippi River? On average, they would say 1,500. Your group would, on average, say about 2,500 to 3,000. What we tend to do is we anchor our estimate based on the way the question was phrased. It's 2,380 miles, in case you needed to know. But this matters, like when you're buying a house. The first person who says the number anchors the debate. You may think your house is worth $150,000, and you say it's worth $150,000. If somebody offers you $130,000, you go, what are you, crazy? You smoking dope? That's an insult. I'm not going to take that money. In the reality, your house may only be worth $100,000, but because you've anchored the debate around $150,000, all the negotiation has to happen there. This happens when you're negotiating salaries, raise increases, anything that has to do with numbers. The first person who gives a number, that's the person who anchors the debate. And in courts, especially in civil suits, if the plaintiff says, this is a $3 million decision, and the defense says, this is a $20,000 decision, the first person who anchors the debate, $3 million, you're going to have to pull hard to get them off $3 million down to $20,000. Do you see where I'm going? But if you anchor it at $20,000, they're going to have to pull really hard to get it up to $3 million. So the first person who says the number anchors the debate. We are loss averse more than gains expecting. So this is a math problem. So walk through this with me. Kahneman and Tversky offered people two options. Choose between an 80% chance of winning 4,000 and a 20, and that's choice one. 80% chance of winning 4,000 and a 20% chance of winning nothing against a 100% chance of receiving $3,000. What will you take? Everybody goes, I want the sure money. I'll take the $3,000. The mathematical, so people choose a 100% chance of winning $3,000. The mathematical expectation, this is the statistics, is 4,000 times the probability of 0.8 plus 0, which is times the probability of 0.2. On average, you should expect to get $3,200. On average, over a repeated course, the better decision on average is to take the 80% chance of getting $4,000. But everyone wants the $3,000. You want the sure thing. Then they ask another forced choice. You get an 80% chance of losing $4,000 and a 20% chance of losing nothing against a 100% chance of losing $3,000. What do you take? You're going to take the 80% chance of losing $4,000 because I'm going to be lucky. I am lucky now. Guess what? It's the same mathematical expectation. People usually choose the first option even though the mathematical expectation of losses was higher. Negative 4,000 times 0.8 minus 0 times 0.2 is negative 3,200. On average, when you think you're about to lose, you think you're going to get lucky. When you think you're about to win, you want the sure thing. This has tremendous implications as you're looking at your retirement, right? Stock's going down. It's going down. Should I get out? Should I get out? No, it's going to come back. I think it's going to come back. I know it's going to come back. It's going to. I gotta. Oh! So you pull the money out. So you pull your money out here, and it goes a little bit lower, and you go, "Oh, I'm so smart. I'm such a genius. I got out before it hit the bottom." And then it starts to go back up. Wait for it. Wait for it. No. I'm not sure. Maybe I gotta wait again because I can't handle it. Okay, I'll buy. Do you see what happens? Now, the whole thing about stocks is you buy low, sell high. What have you just done? Sold low, bought high. Okay? That's this coming into play. Okay? We hate to lose so much we think we're going to get lucky. We love to win, but we hate to lose more. So when you're talking about negotiating potential losses, you think you're going to get lucky. When you're negotiating potential gains, you want the sure thing, which may not mathematically be a good decision. We tend to have an overconfidence bias. I love this t-shirt. I'm number one, so why try harder? I am the greatest. We tend to overestimate our abilities and ignore the base rate. How many of you in here are a worse than average driver? Oh, 3 of you. 3 honest souls, okay? In a room this size, on average, half of you have to be worse than average drivers. Okay? So there are 45 or 50 of you who are conveniently lying to yourself that you're a better than average driver. We are overconfident. We ignore the base rate. So we tend to say, I'm super deluxe, okay? When really you may not be. And that tends to make bad decisions. Now, this is all in the decision phase. The last is in the attribution phase, our explanation for why things happen. And this is the actor-observer bias. So let's use a football example because I love football. I love sports. So, and last night was Super Bowl, so it's convenient. So here we are. You're at home. You're watching your favorite team play. The quarterback drops back into the pocket. His wide receiver runs a route, is wide open. It's like they're in the 3rd grade. He's out there going, throw it to me, throw it to me, throw it to me. I'm open, open, open. And the quarterback, he's got all the time in the world. He tosses this little cream puff pass to the wide receiver. There's no one around. He's standing still. He's not even running. And the ball comes to him, and he drops the ball. That's first down. Second down, same route, same play. He's still wide open, like he's in the 3rd grade. Same easy pass. Boom, drops the ball. Third down, same route, same play, same easy pass, wide receiver drops the ball. You're at home in your lazy boy with a bag of Doritos on your stomach, okay? What do you say? You idiot! You can't catch the ball. You suck! My mama can play better than you. You've never been worth the money. Get off the field. Loser. That's what you say, right? We'll say that wide receiver, his name's Mike. He comes off the field. The reporter goes, Mike, tell us what happened. And he goes, I suck. Your mama can play better than me. I'm a loser. He never says that, does he? He says, hey, I've been playing with the flu. I got a broken rib. Somebody stuck their finger in my eye. I didn't give it 110%. Next week I'll give you 110%. I promise. Right? And you say he's making excuses. Okay? So here's how the actor-observer bias works. When you are the actor of an event and the event goes badly, we tend to give the explanation of that event as situation-specific. That's the actor bias. So if I walk down the street and I do something stupid, I go, I just did that today. I don't usually do that kind of stuff. Okay? And you're looking at me going, idiot. Okay? So when you're the observer of the event, you tend to take a global characterological attribution of the event. The reason you do that is because you suck. Okay? And so that's the actor-observer bias. And when it comes to attributing guilt and innocence, and by the way, does that ever happen where you guys work? We tend to attribute characterological states on people who act when it goes badly. But when we do things badly, we don't. If you look at fraud, okay, there's always an explanation why a person defrauds another person. Well, you don't understand my situation. Da, 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 da. When you're the observer, that's because you're an evil, bad person. Enron, people bad. Okay? It's important, it's important to realize we're all subject to these same biases, and we're all subject to doing bad things. The Dunning-Kruger effect is the effect that people overestimate their ability to do something. How many of you guys have ever thrown a pot on a wheel and done that? Anybody? A couple of you? It's so easy. You watch people do it, and it's like, oh, that's so easy. Until you try it. Okay? The Dunning-Kruger effect is when an expert does something, it seems effortless, and therefore you think anyone can do it. Right? That's the Dunning-Kruger effect, is that you see an expert do it and you think, oh, I could do that, when you can't. And it's also the problem that you all have as experts in your area. You tend to think, oh, it's not that hard. Well, it's not that hard because you've had thousands of repeated practices at this event. Okay? I can't do what you do. I have no idea how you do what you do. Okay? Because it would be hard for me because I don't have any practice doing it. The Forer effect, and we're almost out of time, aren't we? We go till what time?
11:45.
We go till 11:45? Yes, good. Okay. So the Forer effect is the Barnum effect. The Barnum effect, or the Forer effect, is if you give a person bogus psychological data, they'll tend to believe it to be true even though it's not factually true. Okay? It's the horoscope effect. It's like when you read a horoscope, you go, oh, that's so true. true of me? Well, that's because you're going to meet some stranger today, and they'll change your life. I can't wait. When's it going to happen? So we tend to believe bogus data. I think this has enormous implications for the use of psychologists in court testimony. Because unless they've done a really, really good job, and there are people who do a really good job, we're all going to believe what they say because they're experts. Well, it may not be true. All right, so decisional overload. Let's switch to decisional overload. When the number of choices increases, the quality of a decision decreases. We've talked about that. When the decider is asked to reflect on the rationale for the decision, the quality of the decision decreases. So how do you reduce information overload? Here's the practical how-tos. I want to make sure we get time for this. I used to work with people who were hoarders. And you guys have seen that show. I can't watch it. It's just too anxiety-provoking for me. Okay? I've worked with hoarders, and they all believe, every one of them, if I just organized it better, if I could just get some Rubbermaid storage boxes and just organize it, it would all be better. And I tell them the same thing I'm going to tell you about information overload. You think, well, if we just organized it better, if we had a better database system and a better way to process this information, it would be better. No. Rubbermaid makes storage containers that hoarders think are going to help them. They also make this other product that would really be the only thing that's going to help them, which is a trash can. Okay? And so in order for you to manage this information, there is so much information coming to you, you're going to have to sift it and trash it before it even gets into your life. Your filtering system has to be better. How many of you have a junk email that you just, if somebody goes, can we have your email address so we can send you product promotionals? You give them the junk email. Okay, every one of you should have one of those set up that you check about once, every 8 months and just hit delete all. Because everybody wants access to you because they've got this valuable product or service that they can give you. Okay? And so people go, oh, follow me on Twitter. Okay? There's another information flow. Okay? How many of you I'm on Facebook. I mean, my kids are, I track like 4 people on Facebook, and 3 of them are my children. I don't really care what people have to say. One guy, he had a link between his Twitter feed and his Facebook, and 14 times in one day, he's having a brilliant observation. I'm at a conference, and look at this brilliant observation I've just had. 14 times in a day. I mean, I'm a pretty reasonably smart guy. I haven't had 14 brilliant observations in a year, okay? I don't need to hear from this guy. There's only like 4 or 5 people in my life I want to hear 14 times a day, and almost all of them are related to me, okay? So I don't really care to follow anybody on Twitter. And so people go, hey, Roger, social media, you got to get in that. I don't want to be on Twitter. You got to have a Twitter account. It's like, I don't have that many smart things to say. I really don't. And so we're all in this position where we think we got to track people on Twitter and we got to friend everybody on Facebook. No, you don't. So you've got to start filtering that from the beginning. So let's talk about an easy thing. The mail. Okay? I call it the trash delivery service. Okay? So if you're like me, you get the mail out in front of your house, and if you're like me, you walk through the garage, right? Okay, so I walk through my garage, and immediately next to the garage door walking into the house is a trash can and a recycling bin. Trash, trash, recycle, recycle, trash, trash, trash. Then I walk in the house, and you go, oh, but you got to shred that stuff. Guess what's in my laundry room? Right there. Shredder. By the time I walk into the real part of my house, I've thrown out or shredded everything that I don't need, and the stack goes way down. Okay, so you've got to start throwing this stuff out. Now, don't be in the mind that, well, I might have to read it. There might be something important. No, it's a credit card application. You don't need another credit card. Maybe you do, but I don't. Most of this is junk. You don't need to read most of this, because if you read it, it makes you make decisions. And every time you make a decision, that reduces your decisional load. And so you won't be able to make important decisions on other things. So sift and trash. So that's what you do with the mail. You need to have a junk email folder so you can tell all those nice people at stores that you rarely shop at who, oh, you can get a 10% discount if you give us your email address. Oh, yeah, take this one. Okay, and then don't go to it more than once or twice a year. Yahoo doesn't care. Or maybe they do care, but I don't care. So sift and trash. The second is set limits. Set limits on how much information you're going to consume. There's no end of information you can consume. If one of your coworkers or your bosses says, hey, let's research this, you can go out onto the internet and you can spend all dang day researching stuff. And you can download PDFs and you can stack them up in your data file. But guess what? Then you have to read all these PDFs. Okay? Who has time for that? Okay, so because you can download all this stuff, because you can get this information, you have to set a limit in advance. I'm going to work on this project for X number of hours. And you go, well, that's not enough. I guarantee, you guys know the 80-20 rule? 80% of the benefit comes from 20% of the effort. Okay, that means that you can get a B working 20% of the time. I like that math. I mean, that's a very efficient way to run your life. That the additional 20% of benefit is going to take 80% of your time. So decide in advance, I'm going to work on this project for X amount of time, and then I'm done. And what you're going to find is that you're probably going to do a good enough job, and the people who are working 100% of the time on this are not that much better, and in fact, their decision quality may be worse because they've overwhelmed themselves with information. So set time limits in advance. Now this is all has to happen in your head, and you have to have the ability to say no to yourself and to others. Next is respond on your own time. Hey, if somebody texts you, how long till you think you ought to get back to them? 2 seconds, thank you. If somebody emails you, how long till you think you should get back to them? Somebody call it out big.
Next day.
Next day. If somebody leaves you a voicemail, how long do you think you should get back to them? Couple days, okay. If somebody sends you an unregistered U.S. postal letter, how long till you get back to them? Never. Interesting. 2 seconds, 1 day, couple days, never. What if the content of the text, the email, the voicemail, and the unregistered letter were the same? You have allowed the means by which you've received the information to determine your response. Guess what? The people you're dealing with know this. They send you a letter, you never respond, so they give you a call. Takes a couple days. That's not fast enough. So they send you an email. That's not fast enough. They text you. Bing! I got what I wanted. How many of you guys have dogs? How many of you feed your dog at the table? Like 2 of you. And everybody who does is like, oh, I shouldn't do that. Okay, if you feed the dog at the table, you're teaching the dog to feed the, if I come to the table, I'll get fed. So the dog does, so you feed it, and then the next day it comes back, and you go, no. And then okay, I'll feed you. Okay, so the next day it skips the, goes immediately to the bark. Okay, and so you go, no. And then it goes, and so, okay, shut up. Okay, eventually the dog's on the table, because you know that as soon as you start feeding the dog, you have trained the dog, this is how I get what I want. Now, I hate to say your customers and your coworkers are fill in the blank, but you're training them. If you answer a text in 2 seconds, you've trained that person, this is how I get what I want. I'm the same way, you're the same way, we'll all do this. So you have to determine to respond on your own time based on the content of what's in the information, not the way you get it. Relax while you wait for your technology. How many of you guys cuss at your computer? Oh my gosh, this thing takes forever to start up. Oh my gosh, this thing's a piece of junk. I call IT, but they're all idiots. Oh my gosh. Which is, by the way, what the IT people say about all you. Oh, they're all idiots. Remember, the actor-observer bias. Okay? The reason you're having trouble with your computer is because they're idiots, and you're just having difficulty today. They're looking at you thinking you're all idiots, and they're geniuses, and the reason they can't get to your request is because you're all idiots. So relax while you wait for the technology. You guys do the same thing with the copier machine. It's like you get in there, it's like, nobody turned on the copier? Oh my gosh. Oh, I work with such Neanderthals. So, I mean, it's like, okay, that may be the only time all day when no one's going to bother you. They'll go, what you doing? I'm waiting for the copier. Oh, yeah, I know. And you go, I got nothing to do. And you can actually think during that time. Use technologies that work for you. You know, if you can run your life with a yellow legal pad and a calendar that has a picture of a kitten on it, good for you. You know, don't think that you have to get all this technology. If it works for you, great. I had a BlackBerry for 27 days. Do you know why I had a BlackBerry for 27 days? It's because my phone company at the time had a 30-day return policy. I couldn't figure that stupid thing out. I didn't know how to work it. And I would like to think that they were idiots, you know, at Research in Motion, but it was really me. I couldn't figure it out. So I gave it back. So use technologies that work for you. Just because everyone says, oh, you got to use this. This will change your life. It may, but maybe not for the better. So use a technology that's going to work for you. And then schedule time away from information. How many of you have gone on vacation when you haven't taken your work computer or your cell phone? You heard that last one. Haven't taken your cell phone. A few of you. Okay? So what happens when you go on vacation is you're at Disney, you're exhausted for the day, the kids are down, and what you do is you go, just answer a few emails, just you know, and you're up till 2 in the morning. And then you're exhausted the next day. Okay? Because you're just going to do a couple things. Just a couple things. So you have to cut yourself off from that for a time. You need time to do nothing but quiet reflection. A friend of mine, he calls it 20-40-60. He says great leaders, and I really believe this is true, engage in a daily discipline 6 days a week of 20-40-60. 20 minutes of quiet reflection, 40 minutes of reading for self-development, and 60 minutes of exercise. And you're going, that's 2 hours a day. How do you get the time? That's because great leaders have figured out how to carve out 2 hours for revitalization. Physical exercise, reading for self-development, and quiet reflection. And you can double up. You can, you know, read while you're exercising, or if you're a runner or a swimmer, you can do your quiet reflection while you're doing that exercise, but not if you got headphones in. And a lot of you think, 20 minutes of quiet reflection, like just sit there and do nothing? Yeah. Well, I couldn't do that. It'd drive me crazy. Guess what? That's because you haven't done it. You don't have any practice doing it. And you will find that some of your best thinking can come if you learn how to do 20 minutes of quiet reflection. Delegating jobs. The difference between moderately successful people and wildly successful people of any level of, you know, smart, mildly successful people and wildly successful people of, you know, any degree of intelligence is not the intelligence, it's their ability to delegate. You know, if you were that good student in high school and you do these group projects, you know, and you'd always get that guy who didn't work real hard, and he'd be on your team, and you go, oh, I'm going to have to pull the weight on this one. And he'd sit in the meetings, your group meetings, and you'd like divvy up the tasks. He goes, I'll bring the chips. You know, and he wouldn't do anything. And so you're like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to do it. And so you do it, and they get to the group project time, and you've worked your tail off, and your group gets an A, and, you know, Bubby or whatever his name is, he didn't work hard at all. He gets the A too, right? It's infuriating to you, right? And here you are, you're working stiff, and he's off being like some successful, crazy entrepreneur who owns, you know, like the oil and gas rights to all of Nevada. And you're like, how did he do that? I'll tell you how he did it. He learned it in school from you. He learned that he could delegate his schoolwork to you, and you do it. Okay? And that's why he's successful, is because he's figured out in school how to be successful. Successful people have figured out how to delegate their work to other people. And you're thinking, well, I don't have anybody to delegate to. Sorry. Find an intern. So if you want great success, delegate your tasks. Manage your calendar. How many of you guys have to-do lists? If it's longer than 10 items, forget it. Throw it away. Because at one point I used to keep a to-do list. There were 84 items on it. And I thought, what am I doing here? I'm never going to get to these. So what I do now is I put on my calendar. You know, I use a computerized calendar. I put my tasks in my calendar. And I schedule time to do my tasks. So I have exercise on my calendar. Okay? I have, I need to make this phone call on my calendar. And that if I've only got 168 hours a week, same as you. And if I'm going to get stuff done, I have to schedule time for it. And in order to say yes to something, I'll have to say no to something else. So put your to-do list in your calendar. Because if you keep it on the to-do list, you'll go, oh, I'll fit it in somewhere. You'll never fit it in anywhere. Schedule time to do the task. If you don't complete the task at the appointed time, find another time in the future, complete it, and drag it there. That way, you're actually giving yourself the time to do your work. So in order to simplify, in order to be at peak potential at work, you have to simplify life outside of work. So that means do less. Do less. The enemy of the best is always the good. The enemy of the best is always the good. People go, that doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does. If you want to be great at something, you will have to say no to good things, good opportunities, and good activities. If you want to be great, I don't have to tell you, stop selling methamphetamine. I mean, a lot of you go, wow, I got that one locked. Okay? But what you're going to have to say no to is, hey, stop volunteering so much at the PTA. Hey, maybe you need to ratchet back some of that other work you're doing for some other volunteer organization. Girl Scouts are great, but do you really want to be selling cookies? You know, I mean, you have all of those are good activities. And if that's really important to you, you should sell Girl Scout cookies like crazy. But if that's not your value, if that's not your priority, you're going to have to say no to selling Girl Scout cookies and rolling bandages for the Christian Missionary Society, okay? And you're going to, in order to say yes to what's most important. And guess what happens when you say no to good activities? You really tick people off. So lazy. They just don't do anything. They will not like you if you say no to good activities. So be prepared for some backlash. Use less information. I canceled cable this last month. I don't even have an antenna. Okay? I haven't watched the local news since the 90s. I don't watch, and people go, how do you know anything? And because I interact with people all day long, and they go, did you hear? And I say, no. And then they tell me. They feel smart. I get the information. I've saved myself a half an hour. People go, well, how do you know what the weather's like? And I go, well, just look out the window. I mean, granted, I don't have a high-maintenance haircut, but how many of your plans have really been ruined by the weather so that you needed to be knowing what's going to happen on Saturday with the weather? Most of you are like, I don't, never. But yet you spend 30 minutes a day watching crime in neighborhoods that are not your own, learning about information that makes you just feel depressed, and watching the weather that you could get by looking out the window. Okay, so let's say 5 days a week I don't watch the news. That's 2.5 hours I've saved that you've all used up. Guess what? That gives me 2.5 hours a week of excess potential that you don't have. So I cut out the news, and I cut out the national news as well. So there's an hour. There's 5 hours a week that I've saved over the course of the last decade. Okay? And I find that I'm much happier. Because if you watch the news, they're not going to trade in information that's fun, are they? I mean, have you watched what the commercials are on the news? What are the commercials for? Medical drugs, yeah. Stress-related illness, remember? Okay? You watch the news, it makes you feel bad, then you buy the product that they advertise on the news. It works, you know. It's like, you know, you watch a football game. What do they have? Trucks, erectile dysfunction. You know, I mean, they know their audience, okay? So if you're watching the news, it's high blood pressure medication, it's anti-anxiety drugs, it's antidepressants. Guess what? You're becoming the market that drives this. Stop watching the news. So use less information. I don't get the paper. Actually, I get the Sunday paper because there's coupons in the funnies. Do you know what I do with the rest of the paper? It doesn't even make it into the house. I pull out the funnies and the coupons, and the rest goes in the trash. So use less information. Set aside time for rest. You need rest. And rest is not recreation. Recreation is Disney. How many of you guys have been to Disney? Restful? No, here's my image of Disney. Young lady, you're going to have fun. We're going to have breakfast with Tinkerbell in 15 minutes. You better wipe that frown off your face. I'm spending a lot of money on this. Then we're going to have Skip to the Loo, My Darling with Goofy. That's not restful. People go like, oh, I'm so glad to be back at work, man. Disney just about killed me. That's recreation. Recreation and rest are two different things. Rest is sleeping and doing nothing. Here's what rest is. It's sitting on your back porch with a glass of lemonade, watching the neighbor's kids play for 3 hours. When was the last time any of you did that? And you know why I say the neighbor's kids play? Because if they're your kids, you have to do something. Okay? If it's the neighbor's kids, you don't have to do anything. So when was the last time you did nothing, where you rested? And my guess is many of you haven't done that for years. And you need to slow your brain down so you're able to think deeply and think better. Recreation is not rest. It's necessary. If you haven't had fun lately, you need to get out more often. So how else do you deal it? You work outside of the office. You go someplace quiet. And if you go, well, I can't work out of the office. Well, okay. I work with an IT department, and their people get 4 hours a week to work off-site in order to solve the bigger problems. It really hacks off everybody else in the organization. Why do they get to work at home? It's because they're solving big problems that if you keep interrupting, saying, you know, I can't log onto my computer, they're never going to get there. So go someplace to a library or a quiet restaurant without televisions. I'm absolutely convinced that Panera... You guys have Panera up here? Yeah, the reason Panera is so popular is because they play music that has no words and there are no televisions. People love that place. And there will be fewer interruptions than at work. If you go home and there are kids running around and you plug into the internet and start watching TV and turn on the radio, you're going to have all the interruptions you've had before. The computer has brought Chuck E. Cheese into your house. Work on non-standard times to plow through a project, early morning, late at night, or on weekends. You're going, I don't really want to do that. Hey, I know a partner at a law firm, youngest partner ever to make that law firm, went in every day at 4:30. He said, I got a day's worth of work done before the day even started. And by the time 8:30 got there and everybody comes in and they're all interrupting me and I got to go to stupid meetings, the rest of the day was just nothing but stupid meetings. He said, but I would leave every day at 4. People say, how can you leave at 4? He says, I've been here for 12 hours. He put in his 12 hours, but his best time was already done. What we all try to do is make our best think time at the end of the day. Well, we're all exhausted. I mean, your brain is already tired. You're not going to do good thinking. So see if you can find time at the end of the day. And if you're a night person, then you can work at night. Interruptions are your greatest enemy because, remember, you're not going to get that deep dive into deep levels of concentration. You're going to be bouncing around in shallow levels of concentration and not be able to solve problems. All right, we got 2 minutes. We're going to talk about the thing that you have to do mentally, your mental preparation. How you think is the most important thing. Seligman is the guy who shocked the dogs. He's been doing penance ever since, okay? And he's got a book called Learned Optimism, Authentic Happiness, and I just finished reading this book since I wrote this up for you guys, which is called Flourish, which is his best book to date. It is an academic model of happiness, and I recommend it highly. But Seligman has taught how to be a happy person. So I'm going to teach you how pessimists and optimists think differently. Okay? How many of you guys would say you're pessimists? Okay? 3 of you. Okay, let's change the question. How many of you would say you're realists? I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. Okay? Lots of hands go up. Guess what? You know what the difference between a pessimist and a realist is? Nothing. Pessimists tend to be right more often than optimists. They are. They really are. They're better at estimating the likelihood of an event occurring. They also tend to live shorter lives with fewer friends with more health problems. So it's really up to you. Do you want to live a longer, healthier, happier life with more friends, or do you want to be right more often? It's your call. Totally your call. Not trying to impose my values on you. It's your call. So here's how pessimists think. When a negative event occurs, this is how a pessimist will go to permanence. So let's say I go out with my friends. We go out dancing one night, and in the middle of the meeting, or in the middle of the evening, one of my friends goes, Roger, you suck at dancing. Go sit down. You're embarrassing yourself. Okay, if I'm a pessimist, I go sit in the corner and I go, yeah, he's right. I suck at dancing. I took Fred Astaire. I took Arthur Murray. I suck at dancing. I'm never going to be a good dancer. No amount of lessons is going to help. I come from a long line of bad dancers. I have a genetic component that prevents me from being a good dancer. I'll never dance again. That's a permanent attribution. I've come up with an explanation for my life that says, Roger, you are not a good dancer. Don't even try. And pessimists think that way. But they go one step further, which is pervasiveness. So there I am sitting in the corner, and I go, yeah, I suck at dancing. I can't read music. I can't sing. Look at me, I'm by myself at a party. I'm usually by the food table because I don't really have anything to talk about. Not really very much fun. Last week the kids in the neighborhood pointed and laughed at me. Dog bit me. I suck. I'm such a loser. Okay, it goes global. It goes from a single event, you're not dancing well tonight, to I'm a loser. Okay, I'm an unproductive, unhappy, unhealthy, worthless person, unworthy of love and deserving of punishment. All, in the short of 30 seconds. Okay, that's pervasiveness. That's how pessimists think. Personalization is you get your own special Eeyore rain cloud that follows you around. Okay? And you say, why does this always happen to me? This always happens. Okay? And so, how many of you guys, we're back to the grocery store. You guys do line racing in the grocery store? You get in the checkout line. You kind of size things up. Oh, yeah. Taking you down. There you are. And you're in the line and you're getting ready. You're going to unload your stuff real quick and go. And the person in front of you, we have a 21 on register 3, 21 on register. And it's because they got a 15-year-old doing the checkout. Do you guys have this in your area? And 15-year-olds can't go dink with the booze. So they have to call a manager. The manager comes over. Okay, go ahead. Okay, and so he's like, oh, this is like ruining my whole speed. Okay, so then they get out coupons and they're all crumpled up. Here are my coupons. Bink, bink. And you're like, oh, and you're looking, the person's getting ahead of you, and then they need to write a check. I'm gonna write a check. Oh, I'll pay for your food. Leave. Okay, and you say, why does this always happen to me? And you remember this. You're driving down the road and there's grandma in the fast lane. Why am I always behind grandma? Especially when you're in a hurry. Okay. And so pessimists think that there's something specific about you. I got bad luck. Those of you who are Social Distortion fans, anybody? That was an obscure reference. One person? Okay. There's a song called Bad Luck. So that's how pessimists think. Optimists think quite the opposite. When a negative event occurs, they'll think it's temporary. An optimist, you go, Roger, you suck at dancing. I go, yeah, but I don't got my mojo tonight, man. You come back next week, I got it, baby. Okay, so it's a temporary event. If you're able to convince me that I can't dance, I'll go, you're right. I suck at dancing, but I'm good at everything else. And when a bad thing happens to me, I go, that's just one of those things. I'm a lucky person. Things usually go well for me. And what we find is that if you adopt these patterns of thinking, you will live a longer, healthier, happier life with more friends. And you have to confess, well, maybe I'm not right as often as those pessimists, but you will have a better life. Depending on what you stick yourself in the middle of, what you're marinating in is going to change the flavor of you. And if you're marinating in ick, you will start to smell like ick. So be careful about the people you surround yourself with. The way to have a great life, to overcome these stressors, to overcome information overload, is to do less, which is hard, which is going to tick people off. They're going to be mad at you. And you're going to have to discipline your thinking. You're going to have to monitor and manage how you're thinking about this event, and you will have a better life. I know you guys have hard jobs. You really do. And you do the work that a lot of people don't even notice you exist. And that's hard. I get that. If you allow that to define you, you will be a pessimist. You will be unhappy. And I don't want that for you because you seem like decent people. So that's what I want for you today. So anyway, thank you very much for your time and attention. God bless.